Most people write books about what they know. And this is Joe Clifford, and he writes books that shines a light on drug abuse, misinformation, marginalization to certain members of the society. And he knows because he was once one of those members. Give us an idea of how you transition from being a junkie in a very dark world to becoming a well-known author who's succeeding.
The end of my 10-year addiction came to a head in Albany, New York in 2000. I climbed a building ready to jump. Now, this is after 2 previous suicide attempts in 2 days earlier. I shot $500 worth of heroin hoping to overdose. I tried to hang myself, and I was at the end. And when I got halfway up that building, I looked down and I saw these kids and their mothers looking up at this madman, and I realized, and this is going to sound a little silly, a little profoundly obvious, but I realized at that moment all my problems were due to drugs. I had $40 in my pocket. I climbed down. I didn't score any more drugs. I got on a bus. They took me to a rehab. They let me detox. They kicked me out. I sat by the door until they let me back in. They kicked me out again. I stayed at my mom's house, white-knuckling it, holding onto the rails till they found a bed for me. I stayed there 28 days. I begged to stay the longer 6-month program. I begged to get into that. I got into that, and what happened was they gave me an option. I could go to school or work. I hadn't worked in, 25 years. It's very hard to explain a 25-year gap in employment. So I went back to school, and the wonderful thing about education, I'd gone there and I had a bicycle. I had a license. I had a felony warrant for my arrest. I was looking at 3 years in San Quentin. And so I went to the English department and I began writing poems. Still much ashamed. And the professors, I remember being like, no, don't be ashamed. You have a story to tell. You have something to offer this world. And they gave me that confidence to begin sharing more of my work. I began getting some awards. I got on the Honor Society, the Dean's List. I was a Connecticut student touring poet. I applied for grad school down at Florida International. They gave me a scholarship. All the professors wrote letters on my behalf to the state of California, wiping my record clean. The felony went away, and I began working the other side. Having been a bad guy for so long, I got a great thrill out of being the good guy.
Well, it just goes to show how resilient the human soul is to take somebody who really wants to make a difference in their life and give them the strength to do it. So you're a very blessed man for that.
When you want help in this world and you really need help, people, I don't care which side of the fence you're on politically, whatever, if you know a person individually and you want help, people will help you, and they'll go out of their way, they'll bend over backwards to help you. It's a wonderful thing about the human condition, the human spirit, to want to help one another.
Your story is really an inspiration to a lot of people who are stuck in that same hole and don't know that they could climb out if they really want to commit themselves to it.
It's hard to get out of addiction. With alcohol, right, you can have a night, you drink, you pay it back the next day. With drugs, it just sort of accumulates and accumulates. And when it comes time to pay back, you got to pay back all that time you borrowed. And when you're looking at paying back 10 years or having the relief of $20 over here to get high and forget about it and put it off till tomorrow, it's very hard to make that commitment, because whatever you put into addiction, you got to put that much work getting out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a slow slog, and all those things you've been suppressing for years, your physical, emotional, spiritual pain, they all come back. And all those issues you've been trying to hide and mask with the drug Band-Aid, they're there, and they're screaming for attention. You got to deal with them. They don't go anywhere. With getting off drugs, you just have so many pitfalls along the way. I think you need will. I think you need a support community. Will alone will not do it, but you do need will. What you need more than anything is a substitute for the drugs. And
so what did you substitute?
Education.
Okay.
I used education, and I saw that little light, and I knew that if I stayed on that road, and no matter how much I would deviate and backstep and things got wrong, if I saw that light and just kept following that light, I knew that was my one way out. Because if I didn't get out that way, I was going to die.
This sounds like your story is having a happy ending.
Once you get off the drugs, there isn't a happy ending. Life still goes on. You still have the pain. My mother died. My brother died. I have setbacks. Writing is a field of rejection. The difference is now I deal with these things in a more healthy, productive way without using drugs to mask that problem.
What was Joe Clifford like before he was a drug addict?
Joe Clifford was a very angry, lonely, confused, scared kid. But, I grew up in a house with a very abusive father, physically towards my mother, emotionally towards the kids. And I don't think I developed in the way with self-esteem, confidence. My worldview was very skewed. And I originally, when I went to San Francisco, it was to be a rock star. I played guitar. You've heard this story before, right? I was not willing to live life on life's terms. I wanted a set of rules just for me and me alone, and when it didn't work out that way, I used drugs as a quick escape. I will offer the caveat, though, that drugs for a long time fixed the problems. They masked the problems, and that's how addiction happens.
Well, what did you do to come out of this deep hole that you were in and join the bright side of society?
And this really isn't a pitch to buy my book, but this is why I wrote Junkie Love. The story of how I got in and how I got out is very hard to encapsulate or condense down to a soundbite. But the gist of it is, I had an arrest warrant out. My mother was dying, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'd reached a point where I knew I either cleaned up or I was going to die. That's what's so hard on the relatives and friends of addicts. I had a brother who also was an addict, and when I got straightened out, I always hoped he would reach that moment where he decided to live or die, and he would choose the right way, and he chose to die.
All of this is part of the story in Junkie Love. Tell us a little bit about the Jay Porter stuff.
Well, after I wrote Junkie Love, where was I going to go? I knew one thing. I knew crime. I knew destitution. I knew darkness. And I say that somewhat flippantly, but it really did shape what I write now. Everything I write about has an aspect of how I lived. I write now from the other side. I write from the straight guy looking at a world of addiction, because I have an insight into that world that I don't think many people do, and it allows me, I think, to paint my characters with a little more, humanity, and there's a little more ethos. But Jay Porter is basically a handyman, upstate New Hampshire. He clears out the junk from dead people's lives, and in the process, he solves mysteries.
What's in the future for you?
I'm working on another book. I'm editing another book. It's a constant process. I do this full time. I'm lucky. I'm fortunate enough. I'm very blessed to do this job full time, and I cannot thank the heavens, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, enough to have this opportunity. I was, left for dead, and I got a second chance, and I'm trying to do the best I can with that opportunity.
Well, it sounds like you're doing real good this time. Well, thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks for having me.